Before we begin, thank you very much to Runestone Reviews for joining the Patreon campaign. That is a familiar name. Welcome back. Thank you very much for the support. All of the support keeps the channel going, keeps the content coming, and right now is helping me to afford some very extensive projects that I hope you guys get to see very soon. So thank you to everyone for that. Runestone, you pitched in at the highest tier that I offer, which means please feel free to DM me a request over on Patreon. That's the easiest way for me to keep track of them. So thank you for, feel free to let me know what kind of video you want. And that offer is open to everybody who pitches into that level. So thank you very much for doing so. So today's topic, we've touched on Titans a few times in the past, but it's about time to do it again, because an interview was recently done with Mark and Evan from the Transformer team, and they answered a lot of questions. They gave their thoughts and their insights on a few things, but more importantly, one of the things they mentioned is that there's still plenty of Titans on the table. Now, when you look at the span of Titan-class Transformers we have gotten, it seems like almost every giant character that has been done, has pretty much run the gambit. Like, we've done all the city bots, right? We've done some of the biggest combiners. Now we're even starting in on the ships. The Autobot and Decepticon ships have also gotten the Titan treatment. So really, what is left? Like, what haven't we done? What haven't we touched on? So this is just kind of a video just kind of running down some of the ones that they mentioned to give my thoughts, and then some of the other directions that they could go in. If there really are that many Titans on the table, we can see what it is. Now, I've done a video in the past about predicting what the next Titan was. I'm pretty sure it was wrong. I'm pretty sure I got it wrong. But this is just kind of like an overview of the whole thing, because we've broadened the horizons of what a Titan can be since that video. So now it's time to re-examine it. And we're going to start with one that Evan mentioned, is that he mentioned he is not big on the original Fortress Maximus, and this is very high on my list to get a brand new one. Number one, I feel like Fortress Maximus needs to keep that, like, tallest Transformer level at some point. Like, I wouldn't mind him being like a 225 Titan, just so he can be just like an inch taller than the others. He's not going to top Unicron, but then again, he shouldn't top Unicron. But still, I would like him to have another go, because the first one was terrible. City mode, we describe a lot of these as city formers because we assume like they turn into a little city for our tiny Transformers, but that's not really the truth. They turn into, like, combat bases, basically battle stations. But Fortress Maximus is the one that felt like a city, and his new one doesn't feel like a city at all. It feels like a wall. It feels like a wall with a few ramps sticking out. It's a very poor imitation of Fortress Maximus. That comes from being a remold of Metroplex. So yeah, I would love another take on that. And if Evan isn't happy with the first one, probably means there is one somewhere on a design table somewhere. Just who knows when it'll actually happen. But speaking of, I'd like another Metroplex, please. Similar to how I feel like Fort Max needs to just be like that tallest retail Transformer, I feel like Metroplex being the same size as him on the Titan scale is wrong. He needs to be a little bit shorter. Like, we've got Trypticon, and Trypticon's perfect. So we need a Metroplex that's just a little bit shorter, just so they kind of like square up the right way. I want it to be more G1 in flavor. So I erroneously kept mentioning that the one that we did get from Generations is actually based on the Fall of Cybertron design for him. It's not. But it is heavily stylized in a way that a lot of the G1 toys being done at the time were, and I'd really like something that harkens back and hits my nostalgia a lot better. Also, they've managed to become much better with the engineering of the Titans. They managed to make them a lot denser and feel more substantial. While, they shrunk them down in order to accomplish that, but that's fine, because it's still providing me a better toy overall. And I don't like how Metroplex feels as like just like this big, mostly hollow figure. I would really like him to get that same kind of like Omega Supreme level of just like shorter and, more solid in feel. I would love for that to happen. Apparently, Hisui-san wants to do Grandis. Now, here's the thing about Grandis a lot of people don't realize. Yeah, he is a battle station transformer. He does kind of like on paper fall into the same realm as Metroplex or Fortress Maximus in that they have this big battle station mode and some kind of, impromptu vehicle mode. Grandis is a very dull transformer. His vehicle mode transformation is just kind of falling on his belly. He's also deceptively small because he's not designed for mini bots and small size cars like, Metroplex and Fortress Maximus were. They're designed for Micromasters. So he does just open his gut for a bunch of ramps and elevators, but he's designed for Micromasters. So he's actually only like that big. He's like a big meatball of plastic. He's not like a gigantic character. But he is technically some form of city former. He could technically be on the plate. But then that means we have to think about the rest of the battle stars. These guys come in a trilogy. This means that Sky Gary would have to be done as a Titan. Star Convoy would have to be done as a Titan. And fictionally, they are that big. That said, are you really going to charge $200 in America for Sky Gary? Or even Grandis, for that matter. Now, $200 for an Optimus Prime, I'm sure Hasbro would love to get collectors to pay. I'm sure they would love to do that. I just don't see that being feasible at retail level because it's just such an obscure character. Even in Japan, it's a deep cut character. I am more of a fan of adapting something that we haven't really gotten to before, and that would be Autobot City. Now, Metroplex is depicted as part of Autobot City, but like the proper big orange skyscraper city that the Autobots called home on Earth in the 2005, that's the one I want. I've said it on this channel before. One of my favorite customs I've ever seen was someone taking a Metroplex and a Fort Max and a bunch of other like little weaponizer figures for the details and mixing them all together with an orange paint job and actually making a very passable and great looking Autobot City out of the two. It's a brilliant repaint. One of my favorite ever. One of my favorite customs I've ever seen. And Hasbro could absolutely do their own Autobot City. And technically they could even market it as the first, Studio Series 86 Titan figure. The first Studio Series Titan, period. It'd be hilarious if it had like little sections to recreate things that could happen in the movie. Like, like little canopies that came off to reveal the gun turrets, or that little crunch spot where Starscream got his foot stuck. It'd be fun. Lofty, but it'd be fun. But as long as we are in the 86 movie, we might as well talk about the other possibility because they've done spaceships too. What about the Autobot Shuttle? I think this would actually make a really cool toy. It's at least as notable as the Nemesis. It has more screen time in G1 than the Nemesis, I'll say that. Also, you have this really cool function. If the front half comes off, you could Astro Megazord this thing and have it like turn into like the upper body, like the upper part of the torso and the head. Or you could have it form like battle armor, like weapon pack or something for the larger transformer that's from the main body. That's a possibility. I would love to see that. I forgot to grab an image of it, but Galvatron's ship from the movie could also end up being a decent attempt at Titan. The shape of it is weird, but then again, I own a third-party transformer that made it work, so it's not infeasible. But if we're sticking to ships, there is the Decepticon base underwater. The ship is actually called the Victory. It appeared in the 3rd episode of the show, and then just became their underwater base, which technically means it has more screen time than the Nemesis again. And it's also the better counterpoint to the Ark, whereas the Ark is just like, the home base of the Autobots. This is the home base of the Decepticons. The Ark and the Nemesis as Titans are meant to be like the yin and yang, one side or the other. But really, they only had like one brief skirmish in space, and that was over within the first 5 minutes of the episode because we had to get everyone to Earth. If anything, the Nemesis is more known for its appearance in Beast Wars. you know, and if they repaint the Nemesis to look like it did in Beast Wars, I'd actually buy it. But speaking of, what about the Beast Wars ships? I've been asked this on my monthly Q&As, because a lot of people have asked, like, would this work as a Titan? And a lot of times my answer is, no, that character really shouldn't be that big. You know, and weird choices people have for Titans in that realm. But I have been asked if the Axelon would make a Titan, and really, yeah, like, if the arc is viable, then technically the Axelon should be as well. But really, it's the Nemesis again. Again, I will say that the Nemesis, I believe, is more notable from its appearance in Beast Wars than it is for its appearance in G1, even though it's the original Decepticon spaceship. With the Axelon, it's the maximal home base for 2 seasons of the show. We see it in every episode, you know, until it gets destroyed in season 3. So yeah, there's a lot of potential for it, and it's a good shape. Like, it has a good shape to actually work as a transforming robot, which is good. I can't say the same thing for the dark side. You know, if we did one, we'd have to do the other eventually, but the dark side doesn't really have the mass or the shape that the Axelon does. The dark side kind of looks like an earwig with flat wings. You know, it looks like a trident. It doesn't have the bulk it's going to need in order to turn into a robot. That's going to be difficult, which makes the Axelon difficult, you know, because you can't just do the one. They would have to figure out how to engineer the dark side before they even decided to release the Axelon. So that's where that gets difficult. And there's other ships that we could go to. I'm sure someone is going to want the Lost Light. I would want the Lost Light. I would go for the Lost Light as a transformer. I'm sure someone out there would want, you know, the Rod Pod. Of course, I think you can do that as, like, you know, like a Voyager class thing that just kind of attaches to the Lost Light Titan. Or, like, make it his Minicon. Make it like the Minicon or something. But no, we could go on with ships for a long time. There's a lot of ships in Transformers, but we can move on to some of the more, you know, out there choices. You know, some of the other ones that came up. One of the ones that was mentioned was Broadside. And now this is one where, yeah, like, I've been asked, like, many times, like, you know, could Broadside be a Titan? Because he is big. But, like, I've looked at the G1 cartoon, I've looked at Broadside's appearances, and yeah, he does stand very tall compared to other Transformers. I don't know if it's necessarily Titan tall, though. You know, he's not the size of Metroplex or Trypticon, not even remotely close to that. He comes across to me more like Skyfire size. Like, I could see Broadside as a commander class at some point, but I think Titan is pushing it. Yeah, I don't think that would work. Now, don't get me wrong, a proper Titan triple changer would be fantastic, because that sounds like a lot of fun to play with. I don't think Broadside's the right choice for it. I don't know who is the right choice for it, if we're really being honest here. There is one name that comes up a lot that I know a lot of people would be after. Technically, this goes back to the spaceships, but kind of not. Omega Supreme from Animated. So we're getting out of the G1 realm here, because there are options available to us well outside of the G1 spectrum. And Animated Omega Supreme is always very high on the list because it's one of the few animated characters that did not have a toy. And many of those non-toy characters kind of fell off as, like, one, you know, they're like 2 or 3 episode appearances, or they're background characters, so, like, that's not a big deal. But, like, Omega Supreme was a major plot point in Transformers Animated, especially if you account for Lugnut Primes as well, or as Lugnut Supremes, you know? So, like, there's your retool. There's your selects version of this figure. So, the fact that it has a repaint already designed for it, that, like, you can already do something different with the toy, already, like, triples its odds of being a Titan that's chosen at some point soon. You know, so that's actually pretty viable. I think that's actually pretty viable. But if we're going to alternate versions, if we're going to other places, we can go other directions that the smaller lines have gone in that we can now tap ourselves. What if we got a Fall of Cybertron design? Or war, like, what do we get the High Moon design for Omega Supreme? And that's how we get him back into the toy shelves. I mean, I would love things like this. And third party's done these, so there's definitely a market for it. But yeah, like, if we wanted something that's kind of reminiscent of Omega Supreme, but has its stylizing, it presents something different on the toy shelf than we got before, that's an absolutely viable option. Might be more of the same, might be a little bit too obscure, option nonetheless. And more or less, I just want to argue that point, just so I can bring up the fact that I really love the Trypticon design in those games, and that one is the one I would want as a toy. Trypticon as a spaceship just works for me. It just really does. I would love to get this one as a full-size Titan. It's lofty. It's lofty to say the least. But then again, how else are you going to renew that trademark on the name Trypticon? Not exactly like scrambling for options here, like you don't, like you do a big dinosaur transformer or you do nothing. So yeah, that's another one. I can absolutely see that. And we know from like Titan Tidal Wave, like they're willing to go with things that like, yeah, they're willing to go with sizes that generally only appear in the video games. So that's another potential. There's also the idea of tapping toys that were previously gigantic, but we could definitely do for an upsizing, and we're definitely overdue for another one. Right now, we're in this realm of new toys based on Transformers Cybertron, so why not Primus? And I know people cry out that they want Primus to be a HasLab to go up against Unicron, but let's be real here. Cybertron as a planet does not carry the name value that Unicron does, and Unicron barely got funded. In fact, it's kind of dubious whether or not the funding on it was legit because it came in at the last second, and they had to extend the campaign just to get it that far. So I'm suspicious of Unicron, and I feel like we already would have gotten the Primus if Unicron truly was a runaway hit or a very successful release. I think it just barely made it to the point where it was feasible to do. Beyond that, I just think it would work better as a Titan class figure. I think it would have worked better as a Cybertron Titan than Metroplex did. I'm sorry, I'm still salty over that toy. That toy was not worth a Titan price point. I mean, we don't necessarily need to do it as a Cybertron version, though. Like, this version's been floating around that I've always wanted a toy of, and this would be far more G1 accurate. I'd love to have a toy of the G1 Cybertron. But like I said, I don't think it's got enough mass appeal to actually cross over for a, for a Titan or for a HasLab. But as a Titan, I could absolutely see a Primus being done. But that means you got to do a Unicron. You got to do a Unicron, which, yeah, Armada's just sitting there waiting. It's just sitting there waiting. A lot of people have a lot of nostalgia for this, not only because a lot of people grew up on Armada, but also because it's the first Unicron toy we got. So a lot of people fondly remember this. I fondly remember this toy. It was one of my best of the decade. It's still very, very good. You know what? Yeah, like, I could absolutely see this. Someone asked me in a Q&A video once, do you think HasLab Unicron actually reduces the chance that we'll ever get a new Armada Unicron? And I go, no, I think it increases the chance, because they're going to want to do another Unicron eventually, but now the G1 is harder to tap than it used to be, so that does give you an option to work the Armada version back in and bring him out as like a Titan, because, we know him to be, kind of smaller. And like, obviously, he's going to be way out of scale, but at the very least, he will look good based on like how you had your Armada toy collection as a kid, right? That said, there's another direction for Unicron that I don't think a lot of people think of. What about the Gaia Unicron? What if we just went nuts and said Transformers Prime gets a Titan, and we're going to do the big stone Unicron from that series? I would be into it. I would love it. This design's only gotten one toy, and it wasn't all that great of a toy, and it only came out in Japan. So honestly, yeah, like, this is a sick design. This is an absolutely sick design. Look at the scale. The scale is perfect for a Titan. That's about as big as the Titans are. I mean, relatively. Obviously, he's not going to scale to any of the toys. But that's the size of character you're looking for a Titan. That's the point. And that is absolutely, like, that one I would love to see. That's about as out there as I could imagine them getting. Now, like, obviously, there's a ton on the table just with this. The fact that they're doing spaceships, and the fact that they're doing characters from games, and that they're more willing to go into other generations than they used to be, does open us up for a lot more possibilities for what Titans could be done. And it does give us a lot to look forward to and speculate on, so I will invite you to speculate in the comments below, provided you keep one name off of the list, because let's be honest, a lot of people yell for it, but it's never going to happen. You're never getting the giant purple griffin. You're just not. This thing should have been a Skylinks retool, and the fact that it wasn't is a sham. It's a shame. But it certainly ain't Titan level. But the rest of this list are, and of course, Hasbro's apparently chock full of ideas themselves. So, who have I forgotten, or who is your favorite? That's your comment section discussion for the day. So, that being said, thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.